back.
Yeah. Microphone's working?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a little under the weather. I've been sick. This is the most I've been sick in recent memory. I don't know. I was having this conversation the other day with my Christine about why. I don't know if it's because I'm around the kids for so much more of the day now, or, well, I think it's that. And for some reason, she does not get sick. Like, even if I'm sick, she'll give a very mild version of whatever I got or whatever. And she thinks that it's because she went to daycare and I didn't when she was a kid.
There's a theory.
Interesting hypothesis. So if
You are exposed to
more germs.
Germanitis.
Yeah, so there's
Could
a
be.
theory.
There's a theory.
If anyone knows any research on that, I could probably look it up myself. But if you want to make my life easier and just send me it, I would actually be interested to see. If you go to daycare, are you more or less likely to get sick and or recover from illness? I feel like that would make sense, that you're around.
I never went to daycare.
I never did either, but
I don't get sick. I do.
Well,
I've got sick.
This is the thing.
But
I don't know. But so, like, if you're in the environment, same as me, let's say, where good 4 or 5 hours of your day, you're like almost like a teacher at school.
Yeah.
Right. How would it impact you then? I'd be curious to see.
But it's an interesting concept,
right,
dude?
Yeah. Okay. You go.
Yeah. What am I talking about?
I don't know. What do you got? Anything?
Are we just going straight to the podcast, or you don't need any bullshit today?
It doesn't. I don't know. Do you have anything interesting or no?
Yeah, I do. Well, it's actually okay. So we're talking.
You don't
about,
have to, but if you got something interesting,
just explain the first 3 things that we're doing here today, and then this will make sense with what we're podcast. Or I could just say what I was.
Okay, so are your things related to what I wanted to talk about? Or do you
it's going to tie right in, dude.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that works out well.
It's going to tie right in.
So here's my thinking. My line of thinking for why I wanted to do this was we were interviewing a couple international students for the academy. Me and Coach Mac. There, I didn't call you Kyle. Coach Mac. And one of the questions that we asked, and this was a question that Kyle wanted to ask, was how do you consume hockey? Like, what do you do to, like, do you watch games, do you watch highlights, social media, whatever? And most kids are highlights. I watch highlights, I watch whatever. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit first. And then the second piece of it was kind of kids being motivated to practice, is kind of tailed into that with some of our conversation about, like, what do you do to work on stuff on your own? And a common question I get from kids is about feeling motivated, being motivated, and that kind of tails into that. And then I wanted to take those two to branch into kind of off-season planning. So that was my line of thinking.
Right.
Okay. That all you need?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
So I think that might set it up.
Okay, go.
Even though it's going to sound like it doesn't sound like it's anything to do with what we're talking about.
Okay, go.
But it actually does when I
it.
explain my side.
Go.
So funny enough, I checked Instagram today. And on the coach's site, which I don't think, do we follow? I don't go on this.
That's
Okay.
Matt's thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes sense now because I never see this. Yeah. Anyways, Barry Smith had 3 quotes on there that just before you walked in, I saw it. I said, this is perfect because it's something that I talk about a lot.
Barry Smith is?
Barry Kith. Barry Smith was an assistant coach in the NHL for many, many years, a long time with Detroit when they were very successful, Pittsburgh and others. That's a picture of him there. Okay, yeah. And he very smart guy. And he has 3 quotes. I like it a lot. First quote is, a team is not successful when you have a collection of players without an identity. So when you see, a lot of times you'll see super teams and they should win, but they don't, or they don't get along, or something's missing, or whatever, because everybody is maybe more offensive minded or want to be the number one guy or whatever. So if you don't have what was the quote? When you don't have an identity. So what's the identity, right? The next one that is there, it's very, very similar. A team is successful when it has players who fill roles, they accept the role and they play it to their fullest potential. So I really like that one because that's, I talk about that a lot. I find the biggest thing is when people talk about hockey players, they talk about the Sidney Crosby, they talk about McDavid, that's what they identify as a hockey player, the contracts, everything, right? And little less is given to the Zach Hyman. Now everybody wants to be him. He scored 50 some goals, but it's the guys that are the second fiddle guys, let's say, or the defensive defenseman that, I watch my kids' team, and, there's Luchenko that flies around the ice, and you notice him all game because he's that offensive guy and he can skate and he's got a really good compete level to him and stuff. But you don't notice, one or two of our defensive defensemen that make it miserable for the other team to play against, right? So every role you have, where you got a McGuire on that team that goes and he's just miserable to play against. And so which one do you need on your team more? It's like you need both. You need identities. You need everyone to take a role and do their role. Now, when you look at those roles, your number one centerman who gets the penalty kill, power play, is on the ice for faceoffs and is going around setting guys up, scoring goals and stuff like that. That's typically the guy that gets the articles and the notoriety.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work if he doesn't have Rowan Top shutting someone down, or Thomas Budnick making it miserable for someone, or Ryan McGuire creating space for people, right? So that's what makes a team successful, is everybody play their role. And when you have a role, we talk about this a lot of times too, is when you have a role, even though it's not the role that maybe you want or you growing up with, right? So let's just say, use the OHL for example. Most kids that play in the OHL at some point in their life, and probably midget or U15, 16, they were probably more offensive players. Most of the time, they're more of the offensive players. And then all of a sudden, coach throws you into the league and you're on the fourth line or third line and you're shutting guys down. And you're sitting there going, yeah, but I'm good on the power play. It's like, well, it's not your time. Do your job well, because this is how our team becomes successful. And in turn of our team being successful, it helps you become successful. The second part to that is that it's not a bad thing for you to learn another role, because probably at a higher level, you're probably not going to replace Steven Stamkos or whoever we're talking about at the highest level. So playing those roles that are maybe not as glamorous or sexy are the ones that you need to learn, and it's what makes a team win. And then just maybe this is a third point to it. Even if you are the most offensive guy in the role, there's going to be times in a game where it's not about scoring goals, it's about shutting down and being very, very defensively responsible, or whatever, maybe rough, like more physical or whatever. And you do want to be able to play that role when necessary, because if you can't play roles, if you can't play roles, then it takes you away from important ice time at certain times of the game or season or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And then the last quote that he had is, you can't have players that are all the same. You need difference makers. So that kind of goes about what we're saying is, if we're all goal scorers, then who's shutting guys down, right? If we're all big a big physical team that just clobbers people, who's going to score the goals? So if everything's the same, then you've got a bucket of vanilla.
Yeah.
Right? So it's very important to mix everything up.
Well done.
I think it was great.
That tees us up perfect.
Yeah, because now when we talk about all the skill buckets and all that stuff, like it's important to understand these things, because it really is true. Like it's easy to play the game and look at the glory spots all the time, right? I'm a first rounder, or that guy's a first rounder, I need to be like him. It's like, no, you don't. You have to be good at something else, right? Like you hear this all the time and I think it goes to our point of one of the questions about watching the game. If you're only watching highlights, you're only seeing highlights, but you're not seeing a guy maybe necessarily block shots or play a role. And I forget what I was going to say, but it's important to see different aspects of the game.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the PowerTech online membership program. If you've been listening to Andy and I wondering, hey, how are they able to get all this podcast content out there? Well, that's because of our members. For just $9.99 a month, you can get access to our online video library, including hundreds of videos of Coach Andy teaching, and have the option for consultation calls with Andy or myself to go over anything you need. We can cover training, nutrition, coaching, parenting, agents, the junior college hockey path, whatever's of interest to you. You'll also be able to participate in our popular Ask Me Anything episodes, have access to special discount codes, and be given priority for any PowerTech in-person camps or events. If you like what we're doing here and you want to support us, this is the best way to do it. Visit powertechhockey.ca/memberships or find the link in the description of this video to learn more.
So I guess I'm going to kind of turn it into this, talk about the highlights thing a little bit, because that tees it up perfectly. Like I said, I was interviewing these kids, and there was two different kids, international kids, they're young. And same question to both is like, how do you consume hockey? Like how do you learn about the game and on your own time? And it's, for both of them, it was primarily YouTube highlights. That's what we watch. And of course, that's what you watch. That's what's most fun to
exciting.
watch.
It's
right?
awesome.
So what's the emphasis is not on you know, don't watch the thing that excites you. It's that you need to be aware that there are other parts of the game, which starts to kind of go into what you're talking about. So one thing, I was listening to a podcast series that I'm gonna have somebody on to talk about in a few episodes, because I think it was really interesting. He did an analysis of some of the top producing hockey organizations at younger levels and up. And somebody he interviewed, I forget who it was from which organization, but they were saying they do this exercise, which is exactly what we say all the time. They'll bring the kids in and they'll say, okay, what team, if you could get drafted to any team, what team would you want to get drafted to? Let's say the one example he used was Chicago Blackhawks. And this was back, let's say, when they were top end team. So he's like, okay, so I take this kid, I show him the Chicago Blackhawks roster. And I say, okay, here's their roster. Whose spot on this team are you going to take? Is it Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, Marian Hossa, Dustin Byfuglien? This was when they had their super team.
Sharp Keith.
Yeah, Sharp Keith. So you tell me, and they do this with the kids. Like, you tell me which guy you think you have a chance of taking. Do you think you're going to take Toews' spot? All of them will say no. Kane, no. And they do this exercise so they can actually see, okay, so then how can you get picked on this team? What are you going to do? And this is what starts to introduce them to that mindset of focusing on other things that aren't just McKinnon getting a hat trick on the highlight reel, because that's cool. If you can do that, sweet. If you can't, that doesn't mean there's nothing that you can do to get there. You can make it as something that's not that. So something you touched on that I want to get a little bit more specific about is you were saying the quote was, you need to have someone who's a difference maker. And a lot of times you say, okay, a difference maker is this guy, is McDavid, obviously. Okay, can you give some examples or give some examples or details or characteristics of players, like what makes a difference maker? Like, what are some ways you can be a difference maker without being that guy, kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, without being that guy, you know, I say this to a lot of the players I train, and I say it especially to my son, right? If you're playing, like, think about this, okay? If you would like to get noticed, if you would like to get scouted, and you're playing against, give me Macklin Celebrini, he's going to go first overall, and you're playing against him, or you're going whatever OHL, CHL player that's a top guy, and you're middle of the pack, right? You just don't have that, right? So I always say there's going to be 30 people in the rink that night watching Macklin Celebrini to make sure that he's first overall, or they're coming to watch Jet Luchenko, who's a highly rated player, or name the name. So you could compete with that and try, and that's fine. Or when you're playing against him, you could be the guy that is always glued to him, or you're always shutting him down, or making his life miserable, or pissing him off. And then all of a sudden, you're a difference maker. So every time that Macklin Celebrini is on the ice, you have a stick between his legs, you give him a push, you hit him harder, because everyone's watching number whatever he is. And if every time number whatever he is on, or they see Celebrini on the back, and your number is beside him doing something to frustrate him, to shut him down, to irritate him, that's getting noticed. Now, he still might get his goal, 2 goals, whatever, and have a great game, but you're right beside him the whole time. Do that every night against every best player on every team. Guess who's noticed now, right? And then not only look who's noticed, but look who does it on a consistent basis, and all of a sudden you might get known for being that.
Yeah.
So there's one.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good strategy too, because it's just not emphasized. Like, the value on that is not emphasized, you know. And this is where, again, we were talking with these kids, and their first thing is, I want to watch the highlights, because you want to be that player, and that's good. Like, strive to be that guy. That's awesome. But it takes nothing away from you to also develop a secondary skill set or another focus where you can always be useful. Because even, you know, if you play on I just remember back to when I played AAA growing up, we sucked. So if we went and played any team, we were probably getting smacked. Even if I'm one of the better players, it's gonna be a bad game, because one good player against 5 good players, it's a tough night, you know. But if I can still do something to be useful, even in that situation, then I'm always going to be standing out to some degree, right? It might not be my shot, my goals, my drive the net, my whatever, because this opponent that I'm facing is just much better. But they're always in our end, and I always get a stick on this guy, or I always break up a play here, or I blocked 7 shots today, or whatever, you know? And so these other things is where I think as parents or coaches or whatever, particularly with the young kids, it's not to discourage them from watching highlights or to discourage them from wanting to do those more exciting parts of the game, but it's to point out that there's other parts to the game that are actually equally valuable when you actually are playing it in real hockey in a game at a higher level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
So
Yeah.
Anything else on that before?
No, and I was just going to say, like, maybe it's so insignificant to most people, but you pissed off whatever the star is enough to have him take a 2-minute penalty. That's better than him being on the ice, you know. And it's just interesting. And then that's why you try to find a role that could be productive and something that you can do consistently, and then you can always work on your other skills. Like, it's always okay to be a better player. So, and that's what I always say. Like, we might work on something to do with maybe a stick handling thing, and you're never really going to use it. But when you have to use it for a split second, once in 68 games, you've been there before. So that's why it's important to always work on skill as well.
Yeah. So I kind of want to switch to this idea of motivation, because this kind of ties into the point I finished on there. So if you are trying to be the person who hits the highlight reel, I remember that, maybe you do too, that stuff was like fun to practice, and I always wanted to do that stuff, you know. So now we're talking about some of these side things where if you do this other stuff that'll actually make you a better player, it's not as often the fun thing to work on or the fun thing to focus on. So let's, for as an off example, is like you watch a full hockey game and try to study the third line right winger for a full game. It's like that actually takes attention and focus, and maybe you don't actually want to do that much, you know. And this starts to bring into the conversation the motivation thing, because a lot of people, whether it's in the gym or working on skills or whatever, it's like, how do I make sure I'm motivated to work on, you know, XYZ thing? And I feel like it's easy to, I don't even know if motivated is the right word, but it's easy to feel motivated when you're doing something you want to do. It's not as easy to feel motivated when it's something that you either don't want to do or you don't want to do as much as something else. So for you, from your perspective, like, what do you find is like the role of feeling motivated or being motivated to do, you know, practicing things that you like versus you don't like, or skills you need to work on, or, you know, these, even last night I was with a kid and we are doing backwards crossovers with a younger group, and he was like, man, I keep shying away from my left foot because I'm not good at it, but my right foot, I'm good at it. It's like, yeah, you got to kind of force the issue, man, you know, even though it's frustrating and hard. So just let's go general thoughts about being motivated to practice first of all.
Yeah.
And then we'll take it from there.
Well, being motivated, like, as we said before, and we didn't invent this, but being motivated is very fleeting. Like, it's very motivating to sit there on a Sunday night or a Friday night and say, okay, on Monday, I'm starting the new diet. Like, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to the gym. In fact, I'm not even going to get there. I'm going to make sure I get my meals prepared for Monday. I'm going to go to the gym, and then later on that day, I'm even going to go for a run, because I'm going to build muscle. I'm going to eat right, and I'm going to burn some calories later in the day and just really attack this thing. It's the easiest thing to say on when you're not doing it, because you're high in, you know, you've got an idea. It's like, yeah, I'm just going to do this thing. But then Monday morning rolls around, and you still might have that, and you might have everything ready and to go, and then you do get to the gym and you do everything that first day, and that's fine. But it's the motivation, like, things get in the way, things get in your brain, lack of sleep, and just keeping motivated is different, because it's, maybe that was harder than you thought, or you bit off more than you can chew, or you want to see results like right now. So then Tuesday comes and you go, well, I worked really hard yesterday, so I'll just do it again tomorrow. And so anyways, my point is motivation is just very fleeting. It's all it is a feeling, right? I think the better way that people should look at it is just making commitments. And I'm not saying that's easy either, but it's living up to your commitments, because being motivated, if you're being motivated, is you'll do it if you feel like it. And then when you come down to doing hard things, um, like let's say you have in the gym, you don't have, you don't like to do your legs, which wouldn't be very smart as a hockey player, but you don't like doing legs, or you don't like doing glute exercises or the warm up or whatever. Well, that affects you later. But if you don't feel like it, that's one thing, but you have to understand that you need to do it. Right. And then there's another piece to that, I think, too, is like what I've noticed with people that seem to be motivated is they are willing to stick to, or the stick to itiveness to do things that they're not good at. Right. So if you see someone that, you know, and you'll see it in a lot of different areas. So you see, like, maybe you give someone a guitar and they're interested or motivated to learn a little bit, but it's like the first note they're just having a hard time with. Of course. Well, after 3-4 tries, a lot of the times people will go, okay, I don't like doing that, and they just stop. Or you play a game of cornhole or whatever, and it's like if they start losing, it's like, okay, their give a shit meter goes away. And I find there's that stick-to-itiveness that makes a difference in commitment as well. So, anyways, it's not about being motivated. It's good to be motivated, but then it's about being committed and understanding why you're doing something. And it's just doing it whether you feel like it or not. And that's just the bottom line. I mean, there are days and there are times where, for example, use the gym thing again. It's like you just didn't sleep and you feel like crap, and it's not good for you that day, where it's probably better not to do the workout. But if that happens day 2, day 3, day 4, like in the early parts, that's probably you're just making excuses. So it's important to just live to the commitment. So, for example, sticking again with, well, let's not say the gym. It's just, let's say it's a hockey player that decides every morning after I take my morning pee, I'm going to do 50 squats and 50 push-ups before I do anything else. Right? That's reasonable, right? And it's just making the commitment to do that. It's not that hard. Anybody can do that, right? So you could say, well, I set my clock late. Well, that's an excuse. I just, my legs were sore. That's an excuse. You can do those things. It's just, it's doing the thing that you said you were going to do, even though it's hard. It's like, you don't have to be motivated to squat 50 times your body weight, right? It's just, it's doing what you say you're going to do. The feeling doesn't actually matter.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing too. Like the feeling good about it, or feeling motivated is like the cherry on top. But that's a Jocko thing that I love. He always says your feelings don't get a vote. That's my favorite. That's my favorite thing that he says. And doing things that when you don't feel like doing it is actually kind of a skill. Like you can get better at doing things you don't want to be doing when you know you should be doing them. And so kind of tying this in with the highlights thing, it's easy to go out and practice trying to hit the crossbar because that's kind of fun. It's not so easy to practice, making sure that you hit that guy's tape no matter what. You put a little piece of tape on the wall and make sure you pass it right on 100 times in a row. That can get boring. Watching the third line right winger in his D zone and studying why that player is in the NHL, that can get boring, because it's not as exciting. But those are the things that will actually make you better, So, and forcing yourself to do that, that's a skill that you can get better at over time, where it doesn't matter that you feel like it or you don't feel like it. This is what I have to do now. And the analogy I always make when I'm explaining it more to adults and kids, or even with kids, I use the example of school, but either work or school. It's like you have to go. So in the morning, you wake up, it's Monday morning, you have to go to school. You don't get to not go. Some people's parents may let them stay home or whatever, but generally speaking, you have to go. You have to work Monday morning, you have to go. So you're going to wake up, you're going to be laying in your bed and be like, oh my God, I do not want to go. I would love to just sit in my bed, but I have to get up and I have to go, and you do. That's the skill. It's right there. You can see that skill right there. I don't want to go. I have to, because if I don't, there's a consequence. Okay, so you got up and you went.
Yeah.
So now you can.
Well, it's like I got a couple buddies that are chicken farmers, right? One plays on our team, and my other buddy Jordan that lives in that area. Mm-hmm. They're chicken farmers. It's like they don't get to say, I don't want to be a chicken farmer today.
Yeah.
They have to get up at 5 o'clock and milk their chickens.
Yeah.
They got to do it every single day, right?
Exactly.
They got to do it every day. It's like you just can't say it. So you could just sit there and, I'm sure there's days when they get up and they say, I just don't feel like doing it today. I just don't want to do it. And, yelling at the wife, like, start the tractor, honey, because I'm motivated now. It's like, no, you got to milk the chickens. Like, you got to do it.
Yeah.
You got to do it. There's no choice, or else you don't have a business.
Exactly. And so I think that using that example of waking up to have to go to school, or for parents, whatever, waking up, you have to go to work. You're doing it right there. That's the skill. And so when it's, you take it down to some of this other stuff, whether you feel motivated or not, it's like, I have to. So if you're a hockey player and you want to get better at whatever thing you need to work on, and that is in itself a challenge. Maybe you don't know what you need to work on, but that's one of the things you have to figure out. Let's say it's being right winger in the D zone. Then what's the best way to work on that? Well, unfortunately, it's not practicing going bar down in your driveway. You should also practice doing that, but you should spend some time focused on how to get better in your D zone as a winger, And so that's not as fun, but you have to do it. So right there, you can try to transfer that skill of, I have to get up and go to school, to I have to get up and study my right winger in the D zone, because that's something I want to get better at, So I think that's where what you feel about that, to your point, it's like, it doesn't totally not matter at all. It's totally irrelevant. You have to make sure you get it done, because that's the thing that'll actually contribute to you being a better player. And it's funny because sometimes we can talk about this stuff like it's so serious. Very few kids actually do these things, and a lot of kids will end up going on and being higher level hockey players anyways. And it's almost like by accident. They happen to be good. They developed on the right path. They have some natural IQ to the game, whatever. But if you do some of these things, it just increases your chances of
getting something
out of it. So if you're 13 and you start doing some of this stuff, if you're 15 and you start doing some of this stuff, it's just increasing your chances of, instead of it being an accident that you're a really good player, it's like a little bit more intentional now, which is where you can get the benefit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so the extreme is like I was talking to my kid the other day, said, it's so funny how the best players in the world, like, I like using Sidney Crosby, but Yager was the same way. It was like constantly in the gym, constantly working on something. Crosby's like famous for the last little bit, ultra compete, all that kind of stuff. But he was told, or he knew that he could be better on faceoffs, and now he's like one of the best faceoff guys. So to get that edge, so I was talking to a kid about that the other day. Is like, imagine taking a faceoff against Sidney Crosby. You get to the NHL finally, and you get to take a faceoff, and you're against Sidney Crosby or someone. It doesn't even have to be, but I'm using that extreme. What's your chances? Like he goes, what do you think the chances are? I go, 0. Or like hardly, like you're gonna have to take a ton, because he can just sit, get in the dot, look at your feet, look at your hands, look at your positioning, and know exactly what you're doing before you know what you're doing, and he's got all the little techniques of winning that face-off. So my point to that is, as a youngster, what a word! I sound like Howie Meeker right now. As a young player, if you work on one thing or two things like that, and you get rep after rep, and you've seen different versions of that, then you become pretty good at something. So the sidebar of that, when you were going on your little rant, there is, and it's not being like every kid should be doing this, but I think it comes to a point later when players realize that, okay, I have a chance. Oh, it's really hard now, that they realize, oh, it's actually, you got to treat it like a job. You have to treat it like a job. Now, I get most kids are not treating it like a job. They're playing it for fun. But if you do have that workers like mindset, then you actually can accomplish tasks. You can get better by focusing on whatever detail of the game that you want. So to your point, which is very hard for a kid, it's hard for an adult, I think, a lot of times, to watch whatever position you are. Or like when you gave that question, what's another way of consuming the game? Is if you are just watching highlights, you're only seeing the best of the best, or the bloopers that are the worst of the worst, right? But if you're actually consuming games, like going to games that are your same age level and watching players, and then, if you can ask questions, or if you can just find out, why does someone think that this guy's good? Because I don't see it. Oh, because he's always gets the puck out of his end. And, oh, that's good? Like, I didn't know that was so good. What's so good about that? And then you realize, if you start watching, oh yeah, like every time that puck is on the boards with him, and it doesn't matter if the D pinches down or centerman comes at him or 2-3 guys, he finds a way to get that puck out. Yeah, that is good. That is a skill, right? And if you watch that over and over, you see a different aspect of the game that a lot of people would never see, right? Or you see a guy that, the highlights. I had a comment the other day that was talking about one of the players and said, like with most of his goals, he could score with a shovel, right? And yeah, that's a good thing. That means that he's at the net. It's not always like we watched. My kid told me to watch McKinnon score his hat trick the other day, and it was 3 of them just in the crossovers, just blowing by guys. Amazing. So that's one way. Zach Hyman, if you go the other way, he's a guy that he can score most of his goals with a shovel because he's within 7 feet of the net. It's not you know what I mean? Could come there and he's just putting it in the net for within a couple feet. It doesn't have to have an incredible shot. It's the hard work. So how does that happen? That's an interesting way to score goals. So now if you watch Zach Hyman, he's not Sidney Crosby. What is he doing? So a lot of people might say, well, he just has to get a stick on the ice and Sidney or McKinnon or McDavid will find him. True, but he's still got to get in a position where he's open enough for McKinnon or McDavid to get it to him. So there's an intelligence thing there. Like watching, maybe he's going really hard to the net every time, or maybe he's slowing down, or maybe he's with someone, maybe he pulls out. So watching that and seeing the different ways that he gets himself open would be a really smart thing to do, right? So you're using someone else's strength what am I saying? You're using someone else's strength, like basically using it.
Yeah.
Right. Using your intelligence with someone else's strength
to fill a hole. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and that's
support.
Yeah, that's a good way to frame it too. Is like you can finding a way to fill a gap, right? We've used this example before. It's like if you have a really good passer, then you need a shooter. If you got a really good shooter and a passer, you need a guy that makes space or a guy that digs pucks out or whatever. So finding a spot for yourself to fit next to that guy that's super successful is a good strategy also, to turn yourself into a difference maker. Because now Hyman, he's going to be the guy that people go after because McDavid's protected, let's say, and maybe Hyman is as well. But just as an example, it's like, oh, all of a sudden this guy got 50 goals this year. You know what I mean? It's like, well, maybe someone's now going to throw 10 million at that guy. You know what I mean? Because I don't know what his contract is. Maybe it is already super high, but whatever. It's like now somebody else might try to peel him away because, oh, let's see if he can do this on his own now and make our team better because we can't get McDavid. He's stuck with them. But, like, I can maybe get him. You know what I mean? And you're just finding ways to create value for the team, which is cool. So my last thing I want to talk about a little bit is now we're tryouts are next week, whatever, and then we're going to be going into off season for a lot of these guys. A lot of these OHL kids, NCAA guys are coming back. I'm getting our texts from the college guys that are coming home. So I want you to talk a little bit about kind of off season planning, and then maybe coming up with a few different tips on how you would focus your attention, like deciding what to work on, when to work on it, and just some general thoughts about that.
Yeah. Okay, so whether you're on the ice or off the ice, it's gonna somewhat correlate, right? So if you're getting ready to start your off season, or is this before tryouts or no?
Well, we can say it's after tryouts.
Okay, it's after tryouts because it makes more sense. You got more time. The number one thing to me is to have a purpose. So, because I think it's very common for people to blindly go out there and feel that going to the gym is going to make them better, like is the right thing to do. Let's just put it that way. But if you're going to the gym and it's not benefiting you, now I'm not talking about a 12-year-old, but I mean, there's some general things there, but we're talking about kids that can identify that, oh, maybe they're really fast, but they're not strong. So working on being fast might not be the thing that they need. You got to continue to be fast, but you got to make sure maybe I got to get strong as well. And if it's on the ice, it's probably going to be similar, right? If I'm really fast but not strong, or really strong but not fast, I have to have a purpose. So that'd be number one, is to have a purpose. So if we're going on, so you can say, all right, so if I go on the ice and the guy that I train with or the people that I train with, I need to work on something, but it's just drills, let's say, just doing drills. Well, you can still have a purpose. So I just wrote a couple things down here. So if you go on the ice, every drill starts with what? A standing still, basically, or a beginning.
You have to start moving.
Yeah, you have to get yourself going. So I think a really good intention is if you have a purpose of going right. If you go to, you said this with jujitsu, right? If you go there and you just do jujitsu, you don't learn as much as if you went in there and say, okay, I want to get X done today. I want to figure something out. So it's the same thing as going to a practice, going to the gym. It's like, I actually want to do this. So let's just say it's quickness today. So every drill starts with having to get yourself moving. So if you have an intention of going there and saying, every drill, I'm going to get like 1, 2, 3. I'm going to get some pop out of that step. And even though you might be doing it wrong, even though you might be the technique could be better, and you're not getting like coached through it, you can have the intent of accelerating or having that first 7 feet or 5 feet coming out very quickly. And if you do that for every drill or for every stop and start and stuff, you're working on something with a purpose, right? Your mind muscle connection is working. It's no different than, I learned from Charles Poliquin, who was a strength trainer. He said it's when you're doing heavy weights and you're trying to work on speed, it's not necessarily that, let's say you're squatting and you want to come up quick, but you got a lot of weight on the wire. It's not that you're moving it fast. It's the intention of moving it fast.
You're trying to.
Your head, your body, like your brain body connection is like you're trying to get up there as fast as you can. That's the most important thing. So that relates to obviously the skating piece as well. It could be, say skating is not your issue. I mean, you could always make it better. But let's say it's shooting, so you got a really good shot. Well, maybe it's not as accurate. So maybe it's every time you're shooting a puck, you're shooting not, because you see this in practice in games even. You see it like you get a shot on net just to get a shot on net. But what was if you practiced on 1 or 2 spots on the net all practice, whether it was a good shot or a bad shot, and you just find that sweet spot for you, so that when you're under pressure, that's where the puck goes, that you can nail it. Right? But if you shoot with intention like that, then your shot has an intent to it, which could, you're focused on it, which will probably give you better results, right? If so, maybe it's accuracy. Maybe you're very accurate, but it's not hard enough. So you got to work on, I want to get it off hard, clean. Maybe it's with my feet moving, whatever. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it, right? Like maybe when you're shooting, the goalies or the defenseman can see, okay, the shot's coming off. So maybe it's learning how to hide that puck. Maybe it's learning how to create a little bit of deception. But having that deception every time you do something, or 90% of the time, or whatever, there's one way to make yourself a little bit better. So, yeah. Anyways, you can just get a little bit better all the time. It just makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think.
Did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, my thing. I think kind of what you're saying with all this stuff is that's like first step for off-season stuff. Like to have a purpose is you need to know which thing you're missing. So I had a question at the academy the other day and it's funny, simple. It sounds like an easy question. So the guy asked, "How do I get faster?" Right, which is like the worst question ever, because what do you mean? So it took us probably like 5-hour-long lecture times for me to answer that question, right? Because it's like, which part of fast, and I think this is, again, something that we need to teach down the chain to younger kids, and some of it is just they're inexperienced, they don't know how to be specific yet, which is fine, but this is where the teaching part comes in, because even at older ages, like even with our junior guys, I'm not saying me, like I'm so great, but without me, they don't actually know which piece they need to work on, So it's important that you have those conversations and explain to them what is the issue. So if a kid says, I want to get faster on the ice, is it because you don't move your feet fast enough? Is it because you don't generate enough force? Like, which thing are we talking about here? Is it laterally? Is it when you're turning? Is it coming out of turns? Like, which thing is the issue?
Yeah, is it your first 3 steps? Is it top end?
Exactly. So because then is it like, okay, that could be a stride mechanics thing, or it could be a turnover thing, or it could be a strength thing, or it could be a depth thing. It could be all these different things. So you need to come up with a process of how to do this. So I was explaining to them in general, which is why it took me so long, how you would get faster in all respects. So the first thing was, I was saying to some of the guys, if they say, okay, I need quickness, for example. It's like, okay, you want to work on your first 3 strides. Let's say that's what you say you want to do. So that would be what you were saying at the start of the drill. You start from a standstill. I got to get going. That time is what they want to work on. The best way to do that is do exactly that thing, right? You do exactly that thing. So I'm going to go on the ice. I'm going to take from the goal line to the top of the circle, and I'm going to hammer out reps of going as fast as I can from here to there. And that's what I'm going to do. Take full rest in between, and I'm working on my quickness now. Well, that only is going to get you so far. And then it's like, okay, I'm 16 and I've been doing this and now I've plateaued. Let's say maybe even you're timing yourself and my time doesn't get any better. So, okay, so now we've hit an end point. So now what should I do? Well, when you're 16, you should probably put some muscle on. You probably have to get bigger, So maybe that's the next part. It's like, let's put on more tissue so that I can have more units to generate force now. So now I'm switching more to like a strength, force production, power mindset, as opposed to just turn over how fast can I move my feet. So now it's like, okay, I'll do that. So I'll spend some time. Now I got to go to the gym. Now I got to make sure I'm eating. We're still thinking about going fast. That's still the purpose, You put that tissue on and now I need to make sure that tissue can fire. So now I'm going to go into a strength thing where I can make sure I can recruit all those muscle fibers. And then I'm going to go back to the ice after that phase and work on my first 3 strides again and try to get those tissues to fire as fast as possible. And so in whatever 4 minutes I was just talking, we went into big detail on that over 5 lectures, talking about how to get faster if that's what you want to do. So my point of that elaborate sentence is you need to figure out along which point of that curve, if we use being faster as the example, do you need to work on? Because a lot of people say I need to get faster. I need to work on my first three steps. So maybe it's another one of those things though along the arc. Take that to shooting. Take that to skate. Any other part of skating. Take that to passing. Take that to whatever else. So you have to come up with a process that actually makes sense. And how can it actually benefit you when you're on the ice? And that takes being specific. The younger you are, the more you can just be general, and you can still get better, obviously, and figure it out even just by kind of winging it, which you should do some of that too, is just explore and work on things when you're young. But the older you get, the more advanced you get, the more specific you have to be in order to improve whatever metric, whatever goal, whatever skill you want to improve. So going into the off season, kind of like bringing everything together, there's going to be a piece that I want to work on my top end skill stuff, which is like your flashy highlight reel stuff. But then it's like you need to have dedicated time to the shit you don't want to do, which the things that you probably should do that you don't want to do, and you should have some dedicated time to working on those things. But you have to figure it out, and be honest about which part of that you actually need to work on. And some people don't know which questions to ask. That's why it's nice when you have someone that you can talk to, whether it's a coach or a trainer or whatever. But figuring it out, which thing do you actually need to work on, is the most important when you're going into your, let's call it off season, to work on things. You have to know which things are the most important, which things are less important, and then that's how I'm going to organize what I'm working on. Does that kind of make sense? I was going on for a tear there for a while.
Makes total sense to me.
Do you have anything to add on that or no?
Well, the next thing I was going to say is, as we've talked about before, is you have skill buckets, right? We talk about skill buckets, and skill buckets just simply mean that put everything out there that could be a skill. Because you have skating, like you just said. So, what part of my skating is it full, or could I get better? Then you can actually take that and say quickness, power, turning, backwards, forward, whatever. But skating in general is say you're a good skater, but it needs to get better. So that you want that skill bucket to be full. But what you want to also do is take the skill buckets that you're not good at all, or needs a lot of work, and you need to spend time on that, and lots of time on that, because the weakest link in your game is going to catch up to you sometime. Is going to hurt you. Right?
Sorry to interrupt. At what point or what age, like obviously because when you're younger, you're working on everything, you need to improve everything. But as you get older, at what age do you feel like the time division should be, let's say 90%, 80%, 90% focused on that weakness? So I'm going to use your kid as an example. So his thing in the summer last year is he wanted to work on that quickness piece because that was feedback that he got. So a heavy proportion of his time, like I would say, even during his strength sessions, it was like for sure 80% of the time, it's like that was our intention. It was like quickness for everything, So where would you kind of draw the line for, let's say, kids, whatever, up to what age? Do you feel like should it be more, I want to put kind of even division into everything, versus I should more heavily focus on this one thing? Or do you think right from the get-go, like if I'm 12 and I'm really, really weak at this one thing, should I just right away kind of put as much time as I can into this one thing? Or should I keep it kind of more even and then gradually tailor it as I get older to that more of a notable weakness, let's say? Does that make sense, my question?
Yeah, well, okay, so that's a great question, and I think that to simplify that question is to say that could get really complicated if you're trying to do everything all at once. But then you have to kind of break down what is important, right? Keep the main things the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. So skating is important. That's a foundation that you need for hockey. Being able to do 10 and 2s at 12, if that's a weakness, it's not really a weakness. It's just part of skating.
Interesting.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So can you skate forward well? Do you have good balance? Can you turn properly? Can you go backwards? Do you have like a decent start? Like that is A.
Yeah, you've checked the box for
Yes,
now.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Can I get speed and crossovers? And basically, if you're a decent skater at it, like I'm talking decent, I mean, or good, then that's gonna be there. So like that's what you want to work on first, right? You want to be able to turn tight. You want to get in a crossover. You want to have acceleration.
So
Stop, start, right?
So if you're just to be clear what you're saying. So if you're a decent skater, but maybe some of these more top end details of skating you're not the strongest at, that isn't necessarily, we need to make sure we're on doing power skating 5 times a week or whatever.
Most people wouldn't even know at 10 or 12.
Yeah, right.
Because you could have a kid that's like just an exceptional skater that looks exceptional at 10, and then 3 years later when they hit puberty, he's just a good skater, but he's nothing exceptional. Everyone looks the same now, or he looks good, but he's just not strong.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's the basis is like, okay, so what I'm talking about is if you're skating and you're just really having a hard time stopping, or your turns are like, you can't
Not
get a sharp
smooth,
turn or whatever. It's like, then you might want to look at spending time doing that. So there for me, if I was a 12 or 10-year-old kid that I was struggling with the skating, that's where I would be a dad going, okay, well, like you're good at other things. This needs
a little more attention.
Let's put some time into that.
Okay, I got
right?
you.
And you don't need a track coach.
Yeah.
You don't need anything real specific. Just be good at that.
Mm-hmm.
So then you go over to what else do you do in hockey, right? Foundation is you got to be able to pass or stick handle and shoot. So if you shoot really well, or you shoot pretty good for your age, and you can shoot a wrist shot, and you can take a slap shot, a snap shot, you can a decent backhand. Most kids don't have great backhands, but let's say you can get it off, and your passing is equivalent, like it's pretty good. You don't have to go, okay, well, he's 10, and when he shoots, he can't change angles very well, and he can't keep his feet moving, and there's all kinds of deception. That's not what we're talking about. It's just being able to shoot. So if you have a shit shot at that point, then you need to shoot a lot of pucks, and then it'd be the same with stick handling. Like if it's like you're just beating the shit out of the ice every time you take a stick handle, it's okay. That's not good. We got to work on tightening that up. It's like I would say, or start saying around maybe 14, 15, maybe even later when you start getting to junior, and there's still tons of time. But something's going to start standing out, like once you hit puberty, and could be just competing, right? But something's going to start standing out, and then it's like, okay, let's focus on that, and then you can start digging into the deeper layers.
I got you. So just summarize. You think there will always be a skewed amount of time to whatever the weakness is. That makes sense. Then as you get older, whatever that weakness is that is standing out, that's when you would kind of design a program around it. Where it's like now we're
time,
now we're like much more heavily doing this in a structured way. Whereas when you're a little bit younger, it's like, spend a little more time on this, but like still not that serious, and you still kind of want to be doing everything. But so that all is obviously logical. Anything else about kind of? I don't want to get into like too much details of the detail of actually what the off season will look like, because we could do that another time. But just high level, is there any other kind of things you're thinking about in terms of off-season stuff? Just high level, whatever.
High level players?
No, high level things, like not getting into the nitty-gritty details about stuff. So like you said, having purpose is one, and then coming up with some kind of plan or whatever based on your weaknesses. Then you talked about skill buckets. Any other tips like on those things?
Have some fun.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
honestly, go have some
true.
fun with it and do some different things. Like I'm being honest, like my son had an interview with someone and uh, they said, what are some of the things you do in the off season? He goes, oh, I picked up guitar, um, pickleball. Pickleball? What do you mean pickleball? He goes, it's for old people. And he goes, yeah, but it's fun. Loves it every night. Him and all his buddies go out and play pretty much every night. Play pickleball, and they play highly competitive. But you think about it, right? What are you doing when you're playing pickleball? You're working hand-eye. You compete if you care. You're working on your agility, right? Quick steps, changing directions, and you're sweating. You're getting some conditioning. It's like that's okay.
Yeah. And it's
That's
masked
okay.
because it's fun.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, for sure.
That's okay, and age appropriate. Like like a lot of the times you'll expect, like even at the OHL level, you expect like, do you want to be a pro or not?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's fair. You're there because that's what you're there. That's what I'm saying. Like players, at some point, if they're really, really serious about this, realize that it's not just it's fun, but it's a job. It's an everyday job. And do you want to be a pro or not? Do you want to have pro habits or not? And then at some point, they're going to figure it out. And it's you got to do a lot of work, man. You got to do a lot of work, and it can get old really fast. But developing pro habits is you have to find things that are going to make you better. That's the bottom line. But you still can have some fun doing it, man.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. All right. I think I'm good. Are you good?
Okay. I'm good. I'm always good.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. We'll leave it there.
Okay.
See you guys next week.
Okay. See you.